Hi, I'm Natalie Thompson from the Commerce Book Library, and I'm going to be showing you how to make these really cute fantasy jars. When you come for the summer reading program, we'll be giving you these cute little kits on how to make them. They will have tissue paper, cutouts, and the little tea lights. Now, keep in mind these are electric tea lights. They're battery operated. This is because the little dragons, or whatever little creatures we're putting in our jars, they are flammable. Please do not put real candles inside your jars. Once you have made them, please use the nicely provided tea light. Now, to start this project, you will need a jar. Any kind of jar. Mason jars, jam jars, pickle jars, just whatever. Just make sure that you have all the labels off and that they're nice and clean. There's no weird goo on them. We don't want that. That's gross. So to start, we are going to take our tissue paper and cut it so that it's all the way, so it fits all the way around the jar, and it needs to be tall enough to have a little bit of extra down here and a little bit down here. Because we're wanting it to fold over on the bottom and also not cut off abruptly at the top of the jar so it's nice and clean looking. So first, before we do this, we're going to take off the lid. And I'm going to use the jar to measure how long and wide I need my tissue paper to be. There should be ample tissue paper in the kits for whatever size jar you end up using. But when we get here, we're just going to mark a little bit above and a little bit below the jar. And then we're going to take and roll it around. Tissue paper is transparent, so you should be able to see where the overlap is. And I'm just going to put a small mark there. And then I'm going to connect these into a little bit of a rectangle for me to cut out. Make sure you have more than you think you need instead of less. We can always cut off the tissue paper, but it's really hard to add it once it's cut. Here's my little rectangle, and then I'm about to cut it out. Okay. Thing is cut out, so I'm going to throw this to the side, and then I'm going to start gluing this onto my jar. Now, if your jar has a imprint on the glass, you want to make that the back. That's where you want the overlap in this to be. You want this to be on this part. So generally you want to try making this the front clean side. This is where the dragon's going to be. So we're just going to glue some squiggly squiggles of glue all over the outside of the jar. And now we're going to take the edge and stick it on top of this, roughly. We want to make sure we have extra tissue paper on top and extra on the bottom. Now we would need to try to keep it as straight as possible to avoid twisting the tissue paper, because the more we twist it, the more chance the tissue paper has to tear. Because tissue paper is tissue paper. It's very thin and fragile. Okay, now we are going to start, let me put it this way actually, doing more and more squiggles and roll the tissue paper onto the jar. Now when we get to the end, we're going to put extra on the overlap. Make sure that stays put. Now, you can do this with your finger. I don't know that I recommend it. If you have a paintbrush, please use that. And now that we have all of that glued to the jar itself, we're going to put our hand inside of the jar so we can hold it and start rotating it slowly and putting the glue on the outside of the tissue paper. And we're just going to smooth that out. Don't put too much pressure on the tissue paper with your brush or it'll try to tear. If you do end up tearing your tissue paper, just take a piece of scrap tissue paper and glue it on to cover up the hole. It won't be that noticeable for the end result, but that is something we want to avoid. So we're just going to put more and more glue on and try to saturate the tissue paper with the school glue. As I'm doing this, I'm going to use the paintbrush to smush it into these creases at the top and bottom of the jar. Okay, now that we've gotten to the bottom, I'm going to do a circle of glue on the bottom of the jar lid, and I'm going to start folding these inwards and smoothing it out. You can see how I got a little bit of a tear, so I'm just going to take some of the extra tissue paper and cover that up. So a little bit of extra tissue paper. It's going to go right there, cover up that hole. Now we're going to go back to the top of the jar where we have all of this excess. And I'm going to cut some of the excess off. We only want it to go to about part way up the jar so the lid can still screw on properly. We don't want to have too much tissue paper up at the top, or it could mess up the screw on. So I'm going to cut any tissue paper that goes past the halfway mark. Now I'm going to put some glue and adhere it to the inside. The inside of where the little crevice is for the screw-on. As long as it's just the bottom part, the bottom section of the screw-on bit, then it won't actually interfere with putting the lid on. Just want to be careful that we don't have too much bulk. Okay, now we're going to let this dry. I'm just going to pick it up and set it over to the side.
One eternity later.
Once it's dry, and then we'll be able to start moving on to the next steps. In your little kit, you should have a couple different silhouettes of little creatures that you're able to put inside your jar. These jars are really fun because depending on what kind of creature you want to put in them, it can completely change theme. Personally, I'm doing dragons because dragons are cool, but you can do mermaids, fairies, elves, centaurs, literally anything that's on the internet. So I have a couple printouts of little dragons, and I already cut them out at home, so you guys don't have to suffer through the pain of watching me cut these out with an X-Acto knife. And after you have them cut out, you want to round them so they'll fit on the insides of the jar. Now, I'm gonna put the little dragon on the inside. Were you able to see him? And now we're going to take our cute little tea light that was also provided in the kit, turn it on, and drop the sucker in. Now, you could just leave it like this, but depending on what kind of creature you have in your jar, you're able to decorate it to that theme. Like if you have a mermaid jar, you could go with seashells. If you're going with fairies, you could put fake flowers. I'm going with a dragon, so I want underground dungeon, lots of gold coins and stuff like that. So I went and got some gauze, and I painted it brown with some brown paint and water, and I'm going to throw that on here. And I went outside, and I got some dried plants and a bunch of grubby stuff. I'm going to put that, like start arranging it in the gauze. I'm hoping for a bit of a flower crown with dried plant material. Now I'm going to stick the lid on. Make sure a little dragon can't escape. Maybe I'll curve this one around. That'll be fun. And now, if you want, I've seen people do like fake moss and stuff coming from the bottom, or even fake rust with paprika on their jars. So what I'm going to do is I got some cute little, well, I guess not cute since it's dark greens and brown, but I'm going to go for it and start muddying up the bottoms of the jar. So I have some brown paint in here, and from the bottom up, I'm going to start making it less white and pristine. Okay. Now I'm going to get some different shades of green, and I'm going to start splotching it on the bottom. Try to get a lot of texture going. Got some different shades of green on my brush. I'm going to dab it on. The less symmetrical you make it, the better. You don't want it to look nice and pretty, especially if you're going with the dragon jar like I am. Think smog. I think I'm going to take some of this green and mix it in at the top part as well. Okay, I think that's all I'm going to do to mine. But once you have finished your jar, be sure to send in pictures to your local library because we definitely want to see what you've managed to come up with. Thank you!